So, Reed is a friend of mine who I met on Blab a while back. Probably, how long have we known each other? Over a year?
I think it's almost over a year now, yeah.
And for me personally, I don't know about you, but I felt an immediate kinship with you. It's like you were a very likable guy and very intelligent, very bright. And you looked like, what's that actor's name from Britain?
Oh, Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson. Yeah, you remind me of him, and he's hilarious. And but before we talk about street epistemology, what it is, and I'm going to ask Reed some questions about it. I want to play a clip of what interaction that Reed had. What is the gentleman's name that you interviewed here? Do you remember?
Ricky, I believe.
Ricky. Okay. Let me bring that up. Make sure the volume is nice and loud. Now, this is just the ending. It's just going to be about 2 minutes. So don't worry, it's not going to be long. But I want you to take a listen to this. And this is Reed talking to Ricky about deeply held beliefs.
I assess what I believe to be the truth behind the situation, and that's when I create my own truth, which others might call false or say there is no substance behind that.
And your method for assessing these truths are your own imagination?
I think they're relationship-based, they're connection, humanity-based, a lot of love, or the idea of wanting the best for other individuals, wanting to see other individuals thrive. I think that's where those places come from. God, I want to keep talking to you because we're on to something really good. I don't want to have my friend waiting for me this whole time. Sorry. I really like this, brother. Yeah, man.
I'll be here probably every weekend for a while.
Yeah?
Weekend.
Yeah, man. Is this where you're gonna, what's your name, brother?
Reed.
Reed? I'm Ricky, brother. It's a pleasure, man.
Nice to meet you. Stuff to think about.
Oh my God, you gave me so much to think about, honestly. It's like my biases and how I create truth, how I survive, basically, from my own mental gymnastics, you know? Thank you very much, Reed.
Thank you. Tell them all about it.
Okay, so here we have a situation where Reed is talking to a young man named Ricky about deeply held beliefs. Was it about religious beliefs or was it about something else?
I think it started out with like this idea about these intelligent beings out there on the, in the cosmos, and then it kind of went into truth and more generally.
Okay. Now, I've done a lot of interviews, and people do Google Hangouts with atheists and theists, and on Twitter and so forth. And how often do you see that, where a person who's being questioned about their deeply held beliefs says, "Man, I wish I could talk to you longer." He reaches out to you, Reed, shakes your hand. You can genuinely see that he enjoyed talking with you. And so we're going to talk about how you did that, why you think the method you're using is successful. So first of all, full disclosure, I know about street epistemology, and but I'm going to have a veil of ignorance in this conversation. I'm going to try to basically question, read about street epistemology, pros, cons, what it is, and try to take the other side when possible, and see maybe there's even a better method out there. I don't know. But why don't you just tell everybody what street epistemology actually is and why, first of all, why the word street in there?
Sure thing. Yes, so street epistemology is a coin first, it's a method of having a conversation, a term, street epistemology, first coined by Peter Boghossian from his book, A Manual for Creating Atheists, a controversial title, but we can get into that later, how that might, not be the best title for that book. But yeah, it was first explained there. That's where I first heard about it, is from the book. And
how did you hear about the book in the first place?
I don't remember. It had to have been probably online somewhere, possibly the atheism subreddit, or just YouTube in general, possibly.
And before you even read the book, had you ever had discussions with theists or people in general just about deeply held beliefs?
No, not really, no.
Okay. So you went from really not doing any of these types of conversations. You read Peter Boghossian's book, and then you started doing these types of conversations. What in Peter's book did you think was the key to having a good conversation?
I think the key was the general friendliness of it. That's what made me interested in it, because I'm not really the one to kind of be combative and mean-spirited. So that element of it turned me on to it. But what really turned me on to it was seeing Anthony Magnabosco, seeing his videos around November of the year the book came out, like 6 months or 8 months after it came out. That's when I got really turned on to it, because I could see how it could be applied effectively.
But it's kind of weird that you took from this book these types of friendly conversations, yet the title is so, I don't know if Peter Boghossian chose that title or not, but it doesn't seem like a friendly start. Like, how do you convert someone to an atheist? Like that.
I know. It's called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And that's a great clickbait title for atheists who want to deconvert Christians or believers. But what I really see it as now is like a manual for converting fundamentalist atheists into compassionate humans. Just a way to be a good critical thinker in general about any topic.
Okay. And so what exactly is the method? What makes street epistemology special?
It's basically the Socratic method applied to wonder questions about the existence of things. It's if you don't know about what the Socratic method is, it's got 5 stages. First is wonder. The second is the hypothesis. The third is the aluncus, which is like a term about it's just the question and answer part of the conversation. The fourth part is accepting or revising the hypothesis. And the fifth is acting accordingly.
So do you think, does Peter Boghossian actually say in the book that he wants to convert people? Or is it more that he just wants people to think more critically?
In the book, Peter Boghossian goes pretty hard against faith as an epistemology, faith as a method for coming to know things. That's his main gripe. It's not really the point. The point's not really to convert people out of their beliefs. It's to help them have stronger foundations for their beliefs.
Right. Okay. So epistemology is, for some who might not know, just basically is the theory of knowledge, or how people come to say that they know things. So you're saying the book basically says, look, the best way to have these types of conversations is maybe not to delve into the facts where some people might be closed, but rather talk about how did you arrive at the conclusions in the first place, and talk about the methods. Is that correct?
Exactly. When this book came out, it was soon after another book that I have come to be a big fan of, called The Righteous Mind, which I think explains the science behind why the Socratic method works so well. But it's basically just a friendlier way to have conversations about deeply held beliefs without triggering this thing called the backfire effect, where if you're like, you have a belief that's deeply held and someone comes at you and you feel attacked, then you are most likely going to just become deeper entrenched in your beliefs rather than to be open to revising them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've seen that many times when I do interviews. I would say the way I interact with people today is I have the old Doug and the new Doug. The old Doug was apologetics, and how in the world can you believe this when the evidence says this? And we go into the details, and it almost never is a fruitful conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I used to be the same way. If I didn't mention it before, I used to be vice president of a local nonprofit here in Los Angeles called Atheists United. So I was big time atheist activist, I would say. I wouldn't call myself that now, but I was big into apologetics and all that stuff a couple of years ago.
In your opinion, what are the downsides, the cons of this method?
I guess the cons are, if you want to actually get people to believe something that's true, it's hard to give them that information because there's so many steps you have to go through to get them to even to be open to the idea of evidence. People usually just start, throwing facts at people. But as we have figured out, that's probably not the best way to go about it. And also, there's not that much scientific literature backing this way of having a conversation. Peter Boghossian, what he uses is his experiences talking with prisoners and the way his conversations about other things besides religious topics, because he couldn't get past an ethics review board to actually talk with prisoners about that stuff, because he was doing this for his PhD or his scientific research. So when you can't talk about religious stuff, you can't test this method about that stuff. You can only talk about other things with prisoners.
So he used
justice.
So he originally used this method. It had nothing to do with religion.
Yeah, he talked about things like what is justice and stuff the classic, Socratic method topics. But he had tons of evidence that showed this worked for some prisoners with their recidivism rates. I think that's how you say it. Mm-hmm. They would be able to get out of prison and not return to prison. This helped them in some way. So that's one of the downsides with this method, because you can't test this stuff scientifically in the literature because you can't get past ethics review boards. It's not to say that this is unethical per se.
To me, it's very much like cognitive coaching. It's helping people help themselves to explore how they came to know things, why they believe what they believe, how they arrived at their conclusions, what would change their mind if they were wrong. Is it basically that, cognitive coaching?
Yeah, and I think there's another term called motivational interviewing that might be related. But yeah, there's some evidence in the scientific literature about this, but the stuff we're doing when we're talking about faith as an epistemology, that's where our conversations usually lead to for most of the supernatural topics. Then it's a social experiment we're trying to do. We're trying to gain evidence to see if this works. And if it doesn't, I don't know if this actually is the best method for talking with people about these types of things. We're just trying this out.
Well, one obvious problem I see with SE, which is short for street epistemology, is first of all, you have to basically hope that the person wants to talk to you. They might not want to talk to you. And you have to hope that they're open to having their beliefs critically examined.
Yeah, when people hear the word street epistemology, that doesn't mean you have to do it out on the street like I do and Anthony Magnabosco does. For me, I don't want to like hassle people on the street and like, go up to them and bother them. What I do is I go out to public parks, I put a table down, a couple chairs, and I put a sign on my table that says, what do you believe in why? 5-minute interviews. And I just sit there. I don't like reach out to people. I just sit there and let them come to me. And surprisingly, people just do it like voluntarily.
So how long are you out in the park doing this? Like hours?
Typically, it's like from 10 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. One day a week.
And how many people would voluntarily sit down and say, sure, I'll talk to you about my deeply held beliefs?
Usually like 10 to 15. The conversations can last for, I have a little timer for like 5 minutes, a SAM timer, but sometimes the interviews go for like 30 or 40 minutes. I don't like try and keep them there. Once the 5 minutes is done, I'm like, okay, time's up. Would you like to continue or would you like to go?
So if you have 10 to 15 people coming through on one day, how many weeks have you done this?
In person, since last August, maybe, or July, last summer. And I started my YouTube channel November 2016. There was a little bit, of an event there that happened that kind of spurred me into actually creating the channel and trying to practice having better conversations with people.
So have you, like, speaking of empirical evidence, whether this actually works or is helpful or hurtful, have you done any sort of like, I don't know what to call it, exit surveys, or like, I played a clip that this one guy definitely enjoyed talking with you and wanted to talk more, but have you had people say, this is stupid, this is crazy, what are you doing?
I think there's a big selection bias going on because the people who sit down, nearly all of them enjoy the conversation. They're not hostile at all. Like, I can't even think of one that's gotten hostile to the point of like, aggression or insults. They've all been very nice, but maybe just the people that just keep walking on by see it as something they're not interested in.
So it sounds like you've done, what, it's safe to say hundreds of interviews by now?
Yeah.
What percentage of them have been about religion? What percentage politics? Like, what do these people want to talk to you about?
Yeah, another thing is like, I don't want to say like, okay, why do you believe in God? I want to keep it neutral and open. I let them pick the topic. I say, hello, my name is Reed. I have this hobby where I like to chat with people about their deeply held beliefs. Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Typically it's best if it's some kind of deeply held belief, something that influences you on a regular basis, something you think is really true. And I would say half are spiritual or religious in some nature. The other half are about some type of social or political issue. Some are just therapy sessions.
For the ones who want to talk about religious or spiritual issues, how many of them will, because you're saying street epistemology is a Socratic method, so you're the one asking the questions, and they're the ones always answering. Do they ever turn it around on you and say, no, I want to ask you questions? Like, why are you asking me all these questions? What do you believe? Does that happen to you, or?
That happens quite a bit, yeah. And I'm not strict on it's on the method of like just asking questions. If they ask me, I'll give my opinion. I'll give a little anecdote or an aside, but typically I like to leave it till the end of the conversation. Sometimes it's after the interview is done, they'll ask me, "So what do you believe?" And I tell them. I don't want to, keep anything from them.
Because here's one thing that I think is a problem with it, and that is, I used to be a born-again Christian. If I put myself back into those shoes and I see a guy like you, Reed, sitting in a park with a sign, and I'm, I want to spread the good news of Jesus, so I will sit down with you, and you start asking me these tough questions about why I actually believe this, and I give you my answers, and then you ask me more prodding questions, I'm going to think you're trying to convert me to atheism, and I'm going to think, or maybe another religion, I don't know, but I'm going to start thinking, okay, is this guy being upfront with me? Is he being sincere? Or is he proselytizing back at me?
Yeah, people can obviously think that. I mean, that's an obvious thing they could think, and they're very right to think that, because it's usually you see like street evangelists on the street. You usually see people trying to convert them to some idea. But for street epistemology, there is no idea you're trying to put forward. You're trying to understand what is true for both of you.
But is that true, really? Like, you are trying to promote an idea, and the idea is critical thinking, correct?
You could say that, I guess. I guess at the foundation of all of this, there is a kind of idea called, like, it's basically skepticism. It's basically the idea that we should proportion our beliefs to the evidence, that we should be open to believing in whatever is true, whatever comports with reality. And that if what we believe doesn't have enough evidence to support it, then we should doubt it. So you could kind of see it as like a way of proselytizing appropriate doubt for the appropriate amount.
See, like on my channel, everybody can look for themselves. It says doubt is a virtue. So I've basically put my cards out on the table saying, look, this is what my channel is about. I like doubt. I think it's virtuous. And so my...
not like doubt of everything,
right,
always.
Right, yeah. But I purposely keep it as, a short phrase, because I want them to ask me questions. Well, what do you mean by that? And then we have a conversation. But my question for you, Reed, is, and again, I'm asking you hard questions and pushing back, because you're telling me you have 10 to 15 people a day coming, sitting at your table and saying to you, that they're willing, out of their own free will, to talk to you about these things. But what would happen if you put a sign out on that table saying, I value skepticism, or I value even atheism, or something to that line? Do you think they would sit down and talk to you then?
Do I think they would? Do you think I would have the same amount of people sitting down and talking?
Yeah. Is it because that you're behind a veil of ignorance? I mean, a veil of secrecy, almost, of where you're coming from, that a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever feels.
Yeah, it does seem like lying by omission a little bit. I'm not being completely upfront about what I'm doing, but I have the best interests for these people, and I don't think I'm doing anything nefarious. I want people to believe whatever's true, and I want myself to believe whatever's true. And if they have good reasons, I want to believe what they believe.
Do you see the same people like more than once? Like, do they come back and talk to you twice, or is it such a big location? And I know you're in LA, so it's a big city, but do you ever get repeat customers, so to speak?
I do see people over and over again sometimes, a few people. I have not had any repeat conversations yet. I just started giving out a card like a couple weeks ago with my contact information on it in my YouTube and channel, because people see me with like cameras on my table, like, oh, what is this, a podcast? Or no, it's a YouTube channel, you can check me out, here's my card. And I try to give a card to everybody who I interview so they can contact me if they want to follow up.
And have they contacted you afterwards? Has anybody done that?
Only a few, not that many.
Okay. Yeah, it would be interesting social experiment that if I was in your shoes, I would try to run and actually put up a sign that said something like free thought or critical thinking or whatever, and see if those numbers drop. If it goes from 10 to 15, maybe down to 6 to 8, I don't know. It would be an interesting.
I could do that. Maybe like critical thinking test, or do your beliefs, withhold scrutiny? I don't know, something like that.
So for people who came in late, this is Reed Nice Wonder. He has his own channel called Cordial Curiosity. You can look him up on YouTube. He just started the channel how many months ago?
The week after November 9th.
Okay, the week after the election. And he basically goes to a park and he has a sign saying, are you willing to talk to me about deeply held beliefs? Talks to them for a short amount of time, and has been doing this since November. Has 10 to 15 people on a weekend. And how many videos have you published on your channel where people can look?
I think 11 or 12.
Okay. And what I've learned about it is one thing I'm very confident about, and it's that it changes the dynamic of the conversation so it's non-combative.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the cons of it, and I kind of pushed you hard on that because I think the biggest con about street epistemology is, number one, the title is horrible. You should take the word street out of it, because people do conjure up these ideas of Ray Comfort or some TV evangelist or whatever, proselytizing fundamentalism. So I think that should go. And another problem I see with street epistemology is, well, a lot of people refer to Peter Boghossian's book, which has a horrible title. That's another problem. The third problem is what we were just talking about, that I see there is a possibly hidden agenda that people are walking into that they're not aware of. And very few people, I think, would say, no, critical thinking's bad. But still, it's a possibility that they might not talk to you if they think you're a free thinker, one of those people. And but now let's focus on the positives. What do you think is the main reason why these conversations don't get heated?
The main reason why, I'm going to try to explain it in the way that Jonathan Haidt explains his central metaphor of like the elephant and the rider in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis and the Righteous Mind. The central idea behind that is that intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. Our minds are like an elephant and a rider on top of the elephant. And whichever way the elephant leans, whichever way it judges an event happening, either positive or negative, then the writer will either be like a lawyer, it'll either be litigious, or it'll be like a gracious host, someone who is, positive and nice and likes what you're saying. So we have to be careful we're not triggering people's elephants in the wrong direction, so their reasoning doesn't go against you.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding this. You're basically saying the elephant is your gut. It's your
intuitions.
It's your knee-jerk responses. Yeah. And that comes first before actually thinking deeply about something.
Yeah, it's this thing called like system 1 and system 2 thinking fast, thinking slow. Our elephant is fast and automatic, and it's happening all the time. You can't turn it off. It's always happening. Everything feeds through it. And if you're judging things negatively, if you're feeling attacked, you're just going to be like a lawyer or like a press secretary, coming up with reasons to confirm your own beliefs. But if you trust this person, if you see this person as someone who is on your side, or someone who is not going to be, an enemy, then you have the option to actually reason kind of effectively and honestly. You can, and the best way to do that is to not feel attacked. And a good way to do that is by just asking questions gently, in a friendly manner, and you can get around.
But what type of questions do you actually ask? Like,
okay, it starts with wonder. It starts with someone says they believe something, and we say, like, okay, well, is that belief true? And then they give a reason why it's true. This is the hypothesis. So then once that hypothesis comes about, you start asking questions. You start trying to find some type of an example that, if true, would mean what they believe was false. That means that they would have to then revise their hypothesis, come up with another reason, or accept the thing that proves it false, and then act accordingly. And it seems to be that most people have no idea why they really believe things. It takes a little bit of introspection to like go down into your own psyche and finding the deep core reasons.
Okay, so let's give a practical example here. What I'm hearing you say is, okay, let's say you're talking to. I usually talk to Christians because I live in the United States, and most people are Christians in this country, and a lot of them, 30 or 40% of them are evangelical, more on the fundamental side. So what you're saying is, I should not say, I should not ask the question, okay, what do you believe? And I believe Jesus Christ is my Lord and personal Savior. And I shouldn't say, well, don't you know that's just a legend or a myth? I shouldn't ask that question.
No, don't just like put a question mark after your statements. That doesn't count.
But what you're saying is I should ask a question like, well, why do you believe Jesus is God? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, that's kind of a clarifying statement to get to a more specific hypothesis, or something that we can really, bite into and really investigate. But yeah, once we find something like, okay, I believe Jesus is God, and then I ask, okay, then I would ask for, what is the main reason why you believe that? And then they would give a reason. Example, like sometimes they say, okay, I was raised that way. All right. So then I would ask something like, is it possible, like, how does being raised with a certain belief relate to the truth of that belief? Like, if just because someone was raised to believe something, does that actually make it true? And then crucially, part of this process is listening and letting them think. That's the crucial part of it.
Yeah.
Let them,
I often, not so much now, I'm getting better, but I used to just wait for the other person to close their mouth so I can start talking. It's like people are not listening to each other. They're just waiting for the other person to be quiet so you can spew your facts out, and then it just goes back and forth.
Yeah, and there's like vocabulary to this and like structure to this. Once you start actually asking these hard questions, you might trigger the elephant to become a little more, in the negative judgment. So you constantly have to be reinforcing the idea that you're there to understand what they believe. You're not there to take it away. You want to, see it the way they see it. And the way to do that is to listen and often repeat back what they're saying. Ask, are you understand? Like, did I make that clear? Don't let me put words in your mouth, stuff like that. Like, be genuinely interested in what they have to say. Don't be like just waiting there with like a rebuttal to try and like trick them. Like, listen.
What is your opinion on what I do? Because I don't really do pure street epistemology. I kind of mix it up in my interactions. Like I do throw in facts and claims and statements once in a while instead of just question.
I mean, we're experimenting here. We're seeing what works. Sometimes that works if people are in the, what's it called? The contemplation stage. There's like in the book by Peter Boghossian, he talks about the trans-theoretical model of change, and there's all these different levels. But if someone is in the pre-contemplation stage, like they're not ready to hear anything, like they have walls up and there's nothing you could say that could like get them to even consider what they believe to be wrong. If they're in that stage, the very, the most, entrenched in their belief stage, then I don't think facts are going to be helpful at all. I think you have to start just work on the periphery of what they believe and just start asking questions and being as friendly as possible as you can.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I don't do pure SE per se, off the top of my head, I cannot think of a person I've interviewed, either in this channel or when I was on Blab, that has just walked away saying, I never want to talk to Doug again. Yeah. Almost every conversation I've had, the person that says, Doug, thank you for being civil, polite. Thank you for listening. And people who watch the exchange, you can check out my YouTube comments. I time and time hear from other people, I can't believe how patient you are with these people. I'm hearing atheists say, I can't believe how patient you are with theists. And
you get Christian positive responses too.
Yes,
right?
And Christians, the same thing. They'll say, wow, it's so refreshing to hear an atheist or an theist have a civil conversation. And and I think part of the reason, and here's where street epistemology comes in, and I call it the dirty little secret. The dirty little secret is when I hear someone do verbal diarrhea, where they're just talk, and facts are flying all over the place. You can't address every single point and go back and forth and look at the evidence, and it's just, you would be talking for 24 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. What I do is exactly what you're talking about. I pull out what I think is the main reason for the belief in the first place, and then I ask to confirm it. So I'll usually repeat back to them, like you were saying, summarize what they just said. Sometimes it's very difficult, but then ask a question that gets to the root of why do they believe this in the first place? Help me understand you, because you could be right. And a lot of people, here's another con to SE. Do you think that when SEers, in quotes, say, you could be right, but I want to know how you came to the conclusion that this is correct? Do you think SEers are being sincere when they say that?
That's the $1 million question. I mean, it depends on the person. It depends on how actually open they are. And another huge thing from The Righteous Mind, which I took, is that morality binds and blinds. If you hold any value to be sacred and you're part of a moral community, then you are literally blinded by any ideas that contradict this value. So this could happen to atheists. If atheists sacralize the value that religion is evil or religion is bad, you get the same fundamentalist behavior you get from fundamentalists of anything.
Yeah, I agree.
So you have to. This science is more of a mindset than anything. It's an experimental mindset. It's not a litigious one.
Yeah, I want to comment on the atheist part, because I have met more than just a few atheists who are very close-minded to the idea of this unknown, like spirituality, a God concept. And I'm basically, are you omniscient? Do you know everything? No. So aren't you open to evidence? And what if you saw evidence or had some experience and that raised your confidence that there is this other realm? Like, aren't you being closed-minded to not genuinely and sincerely being open to what this person's telling you? And I think humans can actually sense that in when they're having these conversations, that this guy is genuinely open to the idea. But that being said, I do think the problem with SE is that when you disagree with someone, instead of trying to hide it, maybe say, I don't believe you're correct. I'm just being upfront with you. I don't think you're right. But I want to understand you on why you think it is right. Now, obvious examples, like I've talked to a couple of flat earthers, and there's no way I'm going to say to them, you could be right that the earth is flat.
With stuff like that, that's obvious that we're not going to be able to be completely open to that possibility. Like, we have biases, and some biases are actually justified to be biased in some way. And but we can still leave room for doubt about anything,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was watching Sean Carroll the other day, the theoretical physicist, and he basically was saying, when it comes to skepticism, people should be the most skeptical about the things they already believe.
Yeah.
To prevent this confirmation bias that we're talking about. But this gets to the proselytization of the scientific method, that I've said before that I think the scientific method is the worst method of coming to know things, but it's better than everything else.
Yep.
And I stand by that. If someone has a better method, let me know. And some Christians have. They said, Doug, you need to just pray, and God will give you this method of faith, this method of experiencing his love and mercy. But I've tried. It didn't work for me. So so far, when it comes to reliability, repeatability, things that you can count on, it seems like the scientific method has been a pretty good one.
Yeah, I mean, at the core of this, like, I guess the central idea is like the more reliable form of reasoning that you have, the more capable you are of bringing about conditions that will enable you to flourish, the more likely it is that you'll be able to solve goals in realistic ways. Like, the universe doesn't care about our feelings. It is the way it is, and we can know about it. We can be wrong about it, and we can be less wrong about it, more accurately. So we're trying to be less wrong all the time.
What do you think is the best way for street epistemology not to become a church or a religion or this clique of people who just sit around and think, okay, who's our next victim?
I think religion is maybe not the best term. I think of like more of a generalized way to think about religion is like something that's superstitious, something that has some type of supernatural element to it. There's nothing supernatural about what we're doing, but it is possible to be a part of an ideologically motivated moral community. That's the more generalized way of talking about the thing that we don't like about religion. Some type of ideologically motivated moral community, something where there's a group of people who think they're good people because they believe something, just because they believe it, and that whatever they believe has infinite value, which means they're now blinded to reason or seeing any evidence against it. And that could be about anything. And I guess, what is it about this community that it's kind of got a built-in guard against that type of thing, because we're all about doubt.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to sacralize.
Well, that's
Like,
why
are we
atheists...
sacralizing doubt, though? Are we sacralizing the idea that of reason and evidence is supreme?
Maybe that's why it's hard for atheists to get friends, because we always doubt each other and question each other and give each other a hard time. The community aspect is kind of it's intention there. But yeah, I like the friends I surround myself with, and you're one of them. We're not easy on each other.
No.
And we definitely, if we think someone is saying something that they don't have justification for, we'll start SEing each other. And here's the kicker: I would love for theists to SE me. If a Christian or Muslim is watching this right now, please do it right back at me. I beg of you. I love it. You have my permission to get in my mind until I say stop. But you're welcome to come on my channel and ask me questions. Use the Socratic method to challenge me on my beliefs. But here, when I've actually issued this challenge before, but what ends up happening is the claims I make are things like, well, I believe the universe exists. Okay. I believe that the earth is a sphere. Okay. So when you're not making what I would say extraordinary claims like Jesus sat next to me on my bed last night, it's a little tougher to do SE on a guy like me. But
yeah. And this is just a cultural problem. Our culture believes faith or belief without evidence is a virtue. Just believing something like makes you a good person, like with 100% confidence. The
Oh, I want to push back. Sorry to interrupt. I want to push back on one thing, and that is on this word faith, because in my experience, people use that word in so many different ways. And I guess this is sort of a qualm I have with Peter's book. I think he defines faith as pretending to know something you don't know. Mm-hmm. And maybe he's being tongue in cheek there, but if you talk to 10 different Christians, you'll get 10 variations on faith. Some people use it as a noun, some people use it as a verb, some people use it as a method, some people use it as just a synonym for belief. And so how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it's 4 things. It's a synonym for belief, or a synonym for trust, or hope, or an epistemology, which is belief without sufficient evidence. And that's the usage of it that we have a problem with.
Yeah.
Because it's what can't you believe based on faith? If you can believe anything based on faith, how can it be reliable? Like, it's that simple.
Yeah, the way I've described it in the past is that people have their reasons to believe something. And so I'll pick Christianity. They'll say, well, most of them will admit, I believe because I was raised in the culture and my family, so they don't like to admit it, but of course. And then they'll say, well, look at all the evidence in the Bible, archaeological evidence and prophecies and so forth. So, now they're getting closer to the belief up here, and it's building up. Another reason is, I felt Jesus in my life, and so now it's getting closer. And they come up with reasons like that. And then, but there's always a gap. They can't quite get there to the top of the belief. And that gap fill, I think, is the X factor. And that I call faith. I think as a Christian, that's how I would have described it, and that's how I even describe it today. It's that grabbing on and believing in spite of anything that might come to the contrary. No, I'm going to believe this. And yes, I have doubts, but you can't shake me. I'm hanging on. And I think that I don't know how you would say it in scientific terms, but it's that, I hate to use the word clinging, but it's that clinging on for dear life, I think, is a great definition for faith. And we're not like out there trying to take away people's, faith. We're trying to help them, have better reasons for whatever they believe. And if their beliefs help them in some way, like that's crucial to them, like say like for pediatric oncologists, and they're like seeing dying children day after day, and the only way they can stay like sane or have any like comfort at all is by believing that, in the afterlife. Like, we're not monsters. We're robots.
But for most people going about their lives, in general, it's best for most people to believe as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible. That's how progress is made.
Yeah, what Reed's talking about, I can give a personal example. I was talking to a young lady about her deeply held belief in Jesus, and then I find out she's dying of MS. And she's saying, without Jesus, I couldn't make it through the day.
It's like, I'm out.
Yeah, conversation. I didn't hang up on her in quotes, but I say, I change the subject. We're done. I'm not going to take, I don't have any desire to take anything away from you. And I've done that probably 5% of the time. A close friend of mine, we were talking about religion and his belief in Jesus. and we were at a park, and I was using the Socratic method with him. He was very closed. And so I was getting to the epistemology of it all. And then he looked at me in the eye and said, if Jesus is not real, I'd commit suicide tomorrow. It's like, in my mind, I'm going, how am I going to change the topic? How am I going to change the topic? This is dangerous. What have I done? This is terrible.
Yeah, just don't take the risk.
Yeah, and so you have to be very careful in judging if you're going to, even if someone agrees out of their own volition and free will that I am willing to talk to you about these deeply held beliefs, if for a second you sense that this is going to cause them harm, get out, leave the situation, because I don't want that. Reed doesn't want that. So I just want to emphasize that point.
Yeah, and some people may say that their faith gives them comfort, but I said the same thing about my own. Like, I used to be a Christian. Like, I used to have hope that I would outlive my death and go to an afterlife. That was comforting, but it was also kind of debilitating. Like, this life doesn't really matter that much. I could be kind of lazy, but the more rare something is, like if we only have like 80 to 100 years, that means this is extremely valuable. And if we have an ideology that trivializes the time we have, the most valuable thing we have, then we need to talk about things like that.
And we've been focusing mostly on religion, and I want to wrap this up soon. This country is so divided politically that I get so frustrated where the left and the right are just butting heads all the time. I feel like this method of asking questions instead of just making claim after claim after claim. Your guy did this. Your guy lied about that. Your gal said this. Ask questions. Well, how did you come to the conclusion? What would change your mind about such and such a candidate? Or, ask questions instead of constantly just making accusations or claims, and try to understand the person. Repeat back to them what they're saying, so they sense from you that you know their position as well as they do. And once they understand that you know them, you know what they think, why they think it, on that specific topic, they feel more relaxed, at ease, and confident in that conversation with you. And this country needs that right now.
And that's just an attitude that needs to be adopted by, everybody. Someone else comes in, But I think we've covered most of it.
Yeah. So anyhow, check out Reed's channel. He has some really great videos, really good conversations with people about deeply held beliefs, ranging from your typical Christianity or Islam to some really interesting stuff. I'll use the word interesting.
Yeah, it's not all religion. I talked with a guy recently about, he thinks, the entire universe is controlled by a white supremacist system. And I talked with a guy about, drone strikes. I talked with a guy, I haven't uploaded it yet, but he believes in literal, alien abductions, like he was abducted by an alien. Like, these conversations can go anywhere, and they're very interesting.
Thanks, Reed.
Thanks, Doug. See you guys.